أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثا فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وذل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وذل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون إذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطية أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بخيانتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيته أو تشرد من ناويته أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته. فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانا أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كانت لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدعا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلته أو بر نشرته أو رزق بسطته أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في البارزين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقام، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من أهله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا. فاتحة.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. آ گئی زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے. آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. نام بر کو لاش بیٹے کی دکھا کر بولے شاہ. نام بر کو لاش بیٹے کی دکھا کر بولے شاہ. یہ ہے صغرا کی تمنا اس کا اکبر نام ہے. آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. بیریدہ زینب ہے سورج آج کیوں چپتا نہیں. بیریدہ زینب ہے سورج آج کیوں چپتا نہیں. وہ مدینہ تھا نبی کا یہ دیار شام ہے. آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. ہچکیوں میں نیزہ کی تار پائے گی زغرا کی یاد. ہچکیوں میں نیزہ کی تار پائے گی آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. کہتی تھی فضا چنی جاتی ہے زینب کی ردا. کہتی تھی فضا چنی جاتی ہے زینب کی ردا. یا علی آؤ مدد کر نہ تمہارا کام ہے. آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے. کربلا کے واقعے کو ایک مدت ہو گئی، کربلا کے واقعے کو ایک مدت ہو گئی، سید سجاد کی آنکھوں میں پھر بھی شام ہے، آج قبر مصطفیٰ پر ایک ہجوم عام ہے، زینب مستار کے ایک دل پر بہتر داغ ہے، زینب مستار کے ایک دل پر بہتر داغ ہے، حاضر دربار ہونا موت کا پیغام ہے، آ گئی زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے، محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwah al-Mu'mineen wal-Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat Mayyajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward and recite tonight's Majlis par Muhammadin wa Muhammad Salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا وطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل على محمد مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So some of you tuned into the session that we had with Sheikh Azhar on Friday night, and I think it was informative and helpful for a lot of us to understand the topic of Shia-Sunni unity. There were, I think, 1 or 2 questions left over, so we won't be able to go through them, in depth, but I figured at least we can just maybe touch upon them quickly before we continue our discussion, inshallah. So one questioner is saying, Salams, alaykum salam, how about mentioning the principles of bara'at, which is comprehending the actions rather than the actors? Perhaps you want to open some thoughts on that. So yeah, if we had a chance to discuss that in the session, I think it would have been very good, right? So the reason that this question would come up is because a lot of people take this concept of bara'a, or they call it tabarra. They take this idea and say, well, because of this concept, we have to now go out and insult certain figures, right? We have to go and be harsh and aggressive. That's what tabarra or bara'at means. So, and I'm sure many of you have probably heard lectures on this topic before, so I really don't want to open it up too much, but just a few things to mention. Something that we also hear about this concept of bara'a itself is that it's about the actions, not the people, right? So that's another thing I think I want to clarify. So first, let's go to the actual word. So sometimes this concept is mentioned as bara'a. Sometimes it's mentioned incorrectly as tabarra. Tabarra is an incorrect pronunciation of the real word. The real word is tabarri, right? The ya at the end should have the proper ya with the 2 nuqtas, not alif maqsura. But through various reasons, which I don't want to go into, usually people, they pronounce both of these ideas, tawalla tabarra, which is incorrect. It's tawalli and tabarri. That's the proper Arabic pronunciation. Now, obviously I'm a stickler for pronunciation, and more importantly, if there are going to be ulama, or supposed ulama, or speakers, or scholars, whatever, who are addressing the subject, it's a little, off-putting if they can't even pronounce the topic that they're trying to address correctly, right? It's kind of surprising. If they don't know the proper Arabic, then how are they able to discuss it, right? So, maybe it doesn't matter too much, but, for me, that's one of the main things that they'll talk about, right? In a concept, if somebody can't say it right, if they don't know the actual Arabic, then, where are they actually learning this stuff from? It's most likely then that they're picking up the ideas about this from all of the articles on alislam.org or all the other lectures that are out there, which have incorrectly spelled it over the years. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who says it like this doesn't know the actual pronunciation. Sometimes things become incorrect for so long, we just get used to it, and some scholars don't feel the need to change everybody's opinion, and they say, well, let's just keep incorrectly pronouncing it. Well, that's fine, right? Every scholar is different. All I'm saying is that it puts a question mark for some ulama who are trying to open it up. The next is, what does it actually mean? So it comes from the root letters ba, ra, and hamza, right? So bara'a. Literally, it just means, as many of you know, to disassociate, to keep a distance from something or somebody. So tabarra, tabarri, or bara'a is just keeping away and distancing yourself from something else or someone else. That's it. So we know that Surah Tawbah, for example, one of its other names is Suratul Bara'a, right? It's the surah of disassociating yourselves from the mushrikeen or the munafiqeen, which are mentioned throughout that surah. So the other misconception I want to talk about is about this idea that I've heard many speakers, famous ones, talk about that. Look, when we are talking about tabarri or tabarra or bara'a, We're talking about the actions that certain individuals perform. We hate the sin, not the sinner, right? They bring this whole idea in. The problem is that idea doesn't seem like it's mentioned in the narrations. We have the concept of, yes, we should not like sin. We shouldn't like ma'asiyah. We shouldn't like guna. The actual concept of guna itself and sin, we don't like that. But at the same time, we have the concept of ahlul ma'asiyah, ahl guna. Those are also people that we have to keep some distance from. So it's not as simple as just know the sin that's within somebody. If they did something wrong, okay, I don't like what's within you, but I can still hang out with you. It's not that simple. And in fact, we have a narration which it's attributed to Sayyidah Fatima alayha salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. And it's also been attributed to other ma'asumeen, but one of the ulama mentions it from her, where she talks about the concept of tabarri or bara'a. So on one hand, many of the narrations like this one talks about if you want to get closer to somebody like Sayyidah Fatima, to the Ahlul Bayt, you need to know who are the Ahlullah, those who love Allah and are connected to Allah, who perform actions for the sake of Allah. So you have to know that side. In a sense, that's tawalli. We are connecting ourselves and hanging around with and building a network with people who are trying to build a network with Allah, right? It makes sense. But the same concept works on the other side. The exact opposite of tawalli is tabarri. If there are people who are, in the way that it's mentioned in the riwayat, and also in the Quran as well, that people who are the a'da'ullah, they're the enemies of Allah. They're the enemies of haqq and the truth. We've talked about the concept of kufr and the kuffar before as well. People who are on purpose trying their best to push people away from the truth. People who are zalimeen. And this is not something that's irrational. If somebody were to say, I don't like what Hitler did, I don't like the actions, but I still have a soft place in my heart for him, you'd laugh at that individual. If somebody said that about Saddam, mal'un, right? Oh, he's still a creation of Allah. We have to have some love in our heart for him. We don't like what he did in Iraq, obviously, but we have to love creations of Allah. This sort of hippie Islam that people keep talking about nowadays. No, he is a zalim. He's reached the level of dhulm. We're supposed to have hate in our hearts for people like that. So we have to be careful of which concepts are we taking, which ideologies are we grabbing from, and trying to force feed them into Islam. Now, is there a concept of love and forgiveness and giving the benefit of the doubt? Yeah, that exists. But it doesn't exist for people who are the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, who are the clear enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, who are those threatening people at the door of the Ahlul Bayt. We don't have to say that we have love for these individuals. No, not at all. And this narration specifically says, the one who has even a soft spot in their heart for my enemies, according to Sayyidah Fatima, the ones who have a soft spot in their heart for my enemies, meaning the enemies of Allah, then they won't be getting my shafa'ah on the Day of Judgment. So no problem. If you want to open your heart to the enemies of Allah, then what you're doing is you're closing your heart to the shafa'ah and love of the Ahlul Bayt, specifically the love of Sayyidah Fatima alayha salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So it's not hate the sin, not the sinner. Oh, you can have both, but not just any sinner. It's those who really have gone beyond the means, who are openly sinning, openly against the truth, zalimeen, fasiqeen, the kind of cream of the crop, right? That's what we're talking about. So that's I think all I want to say about that. There's more to talk about for bara'ah, but I think that's enough for now. We talk about, the next question, we talk about Sunni Shia unity, which is great. Thank you. But what about, oh, you're welcome. But what about the Salafi Wahhabi? Well, what about them? So I'm unclear about what you want to address here, right? I understand that some may say, well, Salafis, Wahhabis, they hate us, they want to kill us, so there is no room for unity there. Generally speaking, that might be the case. Me personally, though, I think that it's better that we take a more circumstantial, specific, particular approach to everybody. And I'll give you my own story. When I was in college, right, in New Jersey at Rutgers, so I worked in the Rutgers computer labs, right? So over there, some of my managers were Muslims, and they happened to be, what we would call Wahhabis and Salafis. But interestingly enough, they never chopped my head off, right? They never called me, openly they never called me a kafir or a mushrik or anything like that. Now, did they have disagreements with me? Absolutely. Did we ever go out for lunch together? Yeah, we did. Did we have conversations? Absolutely. Did they get heated at some times? Yeah, but we were able to laugh it off. So because we were able to build a proper relationship together, then we were able to have these conversations. Right? And look, if he didn't want to, that person or those individuals didn't want to pray behind me, that's their aqeedah, that's their belief, no problem. I mean, we also have our own maraji, which won't allow you to, with a jama'ah niyyah, to pray behind Sunnis. So it's not a big deal. We have our rules, we follow them. That doesn't mean it automatically leads to hate or violence or anything like that. We can say that, look, what we understand of your belief system is this, but if it's wrong, correct us. And maybe you might have misconceptions of our side too, so let's sit down and discuss. But this is something that, Sheikh Azhar and I were discussing on Friday night, on Friday night for those of you who were there. For most of us, it's not worth it to engage in the discussions in the first place. There is a very, very high possibility that they will know our books better than you and I would. Because a lot of them, because they're trained for polemical discussions, meaning anti-Shia discussions, they will know our historical books, the opinions of our scholars, our views throughout history about the Quran and imamah, and all these other ideas that you and I may not know because they're not discussed from the minbar, right? We know our madrasa stuff, we know some basic minbari Islam, and that's about it. And that's good enough for our iman, that's okay. But when you want to engage in a proper academic discussion, you really need to step up your game. So if you don't know all these things, then the best bet for us would be just to stay out of the discussion. If they try to antagonize, right, they're trying to push you, say, look, there's ulama, there's books that are there, you can go and read those. I'm not trained in these things, I don't know your stuff, you might know my stuff better than me. What would it benefit you to, defeat me in an argument? It's not going to benefit you. Here's a number, or here's the email of an alim. Here's a website that has, this Sunni Shia dialogue and discussions. You can go look there if you're actually interested in learning the truth. And if they are, then they can go and do that. In the meantime, if you and I want to do that too, we can do that. A lot of times, even when it comes to the positions and the beliefs of the Ahlus Sunnah, we end up taking it from Shias themselves. Most of what we already know and think we know about the Sunnis is coming from where? People who are, let's say, very aggressive on the minbar, right? So they have a lot of things to say. And a lot of times they'll straw man the other side. They won't give a clear picture of what the actual Ahlus Sunnah believe. They'll take a small part, they'll mention something which doesn't really make sense, a minor opinion, but they won't really go through all the full details. So it might, if we, let's say, have friends that are Sunnis, colleagues, whatever, we can say, look, why don't you give me some resources so I can learn? Without the intention that we're going to go and try to defeat them and convert them, whatever. Say, no, I just want to learn what your positions are. I'm interested to see what do you say about Ghadir? What do you say about Saqifa? What do you say about, Fatimiyya? What do you say about these things? And it's good for us, again, not to go in and start arguing after we learn. Just, okay, I know your position, and at least I have that in the back of my mind. If we try to become more educated individuals, that'll be good enough for our own soul. We don't need to start going around and going out and starting these fights online or in person. We don't have that obligation on our shoulders. There's nowhere in the Quran that says you have to go and perform da'wah to every single individual. No. People who are trained to do that, let them go and do that. For the rest of us, let's go enjoy our Kahoot quizzes and Slido quizzes and things like that. And inshallah we'll increase our iman that way. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, so I think that's it for the leftover Slido questions. Let's move on to our discussion. And yeah, thank you for those who are logging in right away. We will have a quiz later on tonight, inshallah. Okay, so let's carry on from where we left off. Our topic was the Imam of the time, right? Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajuhu sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajuhum. First, we started off talking about the different objections. People say, we can't believe in your concept, your Shia concept of the 12th Imam because of 1, 2, 3, etc. We mentioned a lot of reasons. Then we started going one by one, trying to reply. Right? We are the only ones who believe in this, so it's incumbent. We have to reply to them properly. Right? Now we said that in the last session. Some people think that, look, it's so abnormal for a person to live this long. Right? It's so strange for this miraculous event to take place. And that would be a reason that they say we can't believe in it. So we said, look, this sort of abnormality, or what we'd call divine exception, is something that happens in every religion. It's normal. We said that there's two groups of people who end up addressing this topic, right? Who try to counter and don't believe, they object to what we believe in about the 12th Imam. So we said both of these groups, they don't really have a place to stand on. So the first group was other religious people, Christians, Jews, Sunnis, anybody else. Say, look, if you have a problem with the long life of the 12th Imam, then you must have a problem with the long life of all the other prophets, right? All the previous prophets like Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, who's living over 950 years, right? And of course, the Jews and the Christians also have, some prophets which they believe to be 700 years old, 800, 900, etc., right? So if they have that belief already, and they know that God has done that for his messengers, his divine representatives, there should be no difficulty in them accepting that the final messenger, the final representative of God, it can also have a long life. So that shouldn't be difficult for them to comprehend, right? And the only miracle, of course, is not just long lives. There's all these other miracles, right? Nabi Isa alayhi salam raising people from the dead and curing leprosy and curing blindness and speaking from, being, as soon as he's born, being a virgin birth. So we should all be used to miracles. That's kind of our calling card, right? So why would it be so strange and abnormal for another miracle, an abnormality to take place? That is the thing. That is the norm for religions. It's to have these supernatural events. Okay, so that's for religious people. What about atheists or agnostics or even some Muslims who don't believe in this, nonsense, metaphysical, the ghaib stuff? They don't like that. Say, look, we already talked about this too in the, former session, that it's not irrational. There's no logical, rational principle that says a person can't have a long life. It's not there. We also said it's not unscientific. We've shown other species, other animals, which have almost immortal lives or long lives. So it's very possible for a human being to also, if they know the right rules and scientific principles, they can also have a long life. It's not unscientific. Is it highly improbable? Fine. We will give you that. And based on that is where we go to the next discussion. So if it's improbable, then the question is this. Why is Allah, they'd say to us, why is your God so adamant about prolonging his life? Wouldn't it make so much more sense just to have him be born in this era? What's the reason for extending the life? It seems like it's useless. Now, they can say, right? Allah, God has to go through all these hurdles of cause and effect and natural law and science and all these things, go against the normal state of affairs just to have this miraculous life of the 12th Imam. But what's the purpose? What's the reason behind this? In other words, wouldn't it be better just to have him be born now? Because if he was born in this era, assuming he's coming back in this era, then wouldn't he understand our time better, our environment better, our society better? Wouldn't he know, we say this all the time, right? He would have the experience of being in this time. That would make more sense. If he's, in ghaiba, he's off somewhere else, then how is he going to understand what's really going on right now? How is he going to address all of the problems that we're going to? And how is it that he can have this sort of global revolution? So what we're looking for tonight is what is sort of the divine justification for the longevity of his life. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I know because almost every night and every discussion that we have, there's always somebody who is on their phone or on their computer and they've got the answers, right? So I usually end up seeing it later on in Slido. Like, oh, you should have just given this answer. Right? So, and I'm sure some of you already have the ideas in your mind. So look, this is our Imam. He's an Imam. He's the representative of God. We have this belief about the Imams, Imamat, that they have this quality, divine knowledge, and Allah just puts it in their heart and that's it. In other words, it's simple. God does it. God puts it there and that's it. It's our belief. If you don't like it, then too bad. If you don't like it, we'll do tabarra or bara'at or la'anat or whatever, right? No, it's not like that. That's not an answer we can give to everybody. And it's clear the reason even Shias have this issue is because a lot of us, in the back of our minds, it's still a little strange and improbable for us. But and it's okay. We can have the why questions. It's good to have the why questions. I know sometimes elders or parents don't like when their kids ask why. And usually it's because the parent themselves doesn't have the answer and they don't want to say, oh, I don't know. No, you should show your children, no, I don't know, but maybe we can go learn this together and go research together. It's good to show your children that you're humble and that you're not willing to stay ignorant or stay stubborn about something. Say, I don't know this answer. That's a good question. Let's go research together. Let's go, ask an alim or go see if we can find a lecture about this. It's good to show that. The simple answer of that it's part of our beliefs is not going to work for most people. Now, is that our belief? Absolutely, it's our belief that Allah puts this in the hearts of the imams. They have this special divine knowledge. Okay, but what we're trying to do is this. For the people who are questioning this idea of imamah in the first place, of the 12th imam and a long life, the problem for them is that for the imam, for a human to live this long is improbable. And we already granted them that. He said, we know it's improbable, it's impractical, it's not normal. We agree. So, if we have to get somebody else to try their best to believe it, or at least understand it, we have to give them some good reasons at least. And it can't be reasons that only you and I can understand in terms of the Quran or Hadith. If they don't believe in it, it's not going to work. So we have to look, is there some basic, let's say, basic rational ideas that we can try to get them to understand? Even if we have our own belief system in the Quran and Hadith, that's fine. But something that maybe we can offer them just to at least bring them closer, and then maybe later on we can show them the Quran and Hadith if they come to that level. So yes, there are a few points that we can go through. We have to remember something else too. When we're trying to understand something, for example, proving that God exists, sometimes you and I will give something really simple, like, look at the beauty in the world. Isn't that obvious? For a lot of people, that will work. They'll look at the planetary systems, the orbit, the cosmos, and all these ideas in astronomy. That's enough. Sometimes they'll look at the beauty of a flower and they'll think about a creator and a designer. And that's enough. But other people, they need a little bit more than that. That won't be enough for them. And just like if we were presenting our ideas in a court of law, it's not enough sometimes to present one piece of evidence. Sometimes we have to offer up multiple pieces of evidence and actually build a case. And some scholars, not Muslims necessarily, but Christian theologians, they say that this is something that has to be done even in terms of proving God's existence. Now, we believe that we have rational proofs, which are undeniable. But let's say somebody has an issue. Say, look, okay, we can offer 1, 2, 3, 4, a bunch of these different proofs. Now, here's our evidence, or here's all of our pieces of evidence. This is our case for God. What is your case for atheism, for example? How many pieces of evidence can you offer? And then we take a simple, rational, mathematical look and say which evidence has more weight to it, right? We want to do the same thing over here. We have the Quran and Hadith for those who need it, like the Shias or even some of the Ahl Sunnah. But for everybody else, we want to build a case for them as well and offer other pieces of evidence. So the first thing we need to clarify when we're talking about what's the purpose of having this Imam live for so long, is, okay, well, what is his mission? Well, the mission is this big, grandiose thing of a complete and total societal revolution for the benefit of all mankind. Really simple. Now, what are the reasons that are absolutely necessary? In order to show us that it's much better that we have a imam, a person, living for all of these years rather than being born at the last second. The main point is about the idea of awareness, consciousness, and experience. And this can be explained on 3 different levels, 3 different spheres and dimensions. So we're going to mention those, inshallah, in the few minutes that we have. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So if some of you remember, the first session, that first virtual talk that we had with Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Qazwini, we were talking about political activism among Muslims or Shia specifically. And one of the points that we talked about was that a lot of Shias, a lot of Muslims, they really want to get involved in politics. They really want to get active. And okay, maybe that's good. The problem is usually twofold. One is sometimes they don't actually have the Islamic or religious knowledge to know what is right and wrong, what is halal and haram in terms of engaging in politics in the West. So before even doing that, they just jump right in. Say, oh, it's obvious we have to do that, without even asking their marja if they're allowed to do X, Y, or Z. So sometimes they don't know the religious information, but other times they might know the religion, but they don't actually know the politics. They don't understand how the system here works. It's amazing, I've had so many conversations with people who talk about, presidential elections and things like that, and they still think that the presidents are elected by popular vote. Like, do you have any clue that this is all done by electoral college? There is no direct democracy here. It doesn't exist in America. There is no direct democracy. It's indirect through representatives, right? It's a federal republic. We put in representatives, and there's people who are in electoral college who therefore vote for who they want. Sometimes they can go with the popular vote, and as we've seen a few times, sometimes they go against. So if somebody doesn't know these basic ideas, it seems strange for them to want to engage in politics in the first place. So in that light, one of the reasons we'd say that it makes sense for the imam to live so long is because now he has an awareness, a consciousness, and lived experience through various different types of systems, governments, and political ideologies throughout the years. Now, you and I, we can read about Rome or Greece or the Byzantine Empire or the Ottoman Empire, all these things we can read about in books. But that's much different than having an individual who has lived through all of these things. Now, we have to go back to one misconception too. Sometimes when we think about ghaiba, we think literally about the imam is just sitting in a cave by himself and he's cut off from the world. No, that's not the case. You and I might be cut off from the imam. The world might be cut off from the imam, but the imam is not cut off from the world. He has, as many ulama say, he's completely involved and has interactions with many different players and elements, but we're not aware of it, right? But again, that's something that we'll address much later on about his sort of interaction with various different things throughout history. Maybe we'll address that in another discussion. What we're saying is the first reason, if he was born right now, then he wouldn't have the knowledge of how previous empires, systems, oppressive systems have gone on throughout the ages. Now that he's gone through that, he can say, look, this is what the Romans did, this is what the Greeks did, this is what the first three Khulafa did, this is what the Umayyads did, this is what the Abbasids did, because he has that continued teaching from his forefathers as well. Then afterwards, right, all the other empires which came after that, he can say, I have all the lived experiences, I know all of their tactics, and I know how to counter those altogether. So to have that long life lived experience is obviously much better than somebody who is just born now, who's only learning about these previous ideas from a book. So that's our first point. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The second one. So if you remember, when the U.S. had occupied Iraq, one of the first things they had said, post-invasion, is that we have to go and win the hearts and minds of the Iraqi people, right? It's not enough to simply topple the, oppressive Saddam government. We actually have to win over the Iraqis, right? Now, again, I don't want to comment on that, obviously. But the point is this. It's not enough to know about the systems, the governments, and oppressive ideologies. You also have to understand the people who have become enslaved to these ideas too. Because throughout history, as we've seen time and time again, these political structures, because of their excellent propaganda, have a lot of slaves. People who have bought into the propaganda. Now, of course, us as Shias, we are very well aware of the propaganda machine of people like Muawiyah, for example, right? And even of Yazid, who had spread so much misinformation that Muslims just didn't really understand what was going on, right? To not a large extent, but to some extent. They were confused about what was happening. And we've seen this over and over again. Throughout various empires, they've been doing this. This is a classic strategy of those who are in power, right? Oppressive individuals and dictators. Now think about this. The imam comes back. He's got all these individuals to deal with. People who have been living their life a certain way, right? All the different religions that they might have been following, right? Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all the things that are there. All the different sects and denominations of all those different religions. He has to deal with atheistic people, agnostic people, skeptics, all these different types. And not just that, think about the Muslims themselves. He's going to have to convince, right, the Ahlul Sunnah to some degree of, that I've been living this long. He has to convince them of that idea. He also is going to have to convince some Shias. We know this from the narrations, and again, later on, we'll have to talk about this. We know that when the 12th Imam comes, he's going to, according to some narrations, the way that he'll be describing the deen, the real deen, the way that was brought by Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The narrations say that it'll be foreign to a lot of us. It's going to be strange. We will think that this person who's claiming to be the 12th Imam, the way he's talking about religion, no, this can't be it. He can't be the Imam, he has to be, na'udhu billah, Dajjal or something else. Because he's going against what we believe about Islam. Now the question is, the things that he will come and bring that will sound different? Is it because we truly understand Islam, or is it because we've brought in certain cultural ideas into Islam and we've made it Islam? And because of that, when the Imam comes to correct these incorrect ideas and behaviors, now we're like, you know what? Deep down, I want my culture, I don't want this religion. That's going to be an issue for us to, we're going to have to deal with. And inshallah, when we open that up later on, maybe we can talk about some of those specific ideas. So it's not just various religions, it's not just different ideas, philosophies, and belief systems, but even among those who are looking and ready for the return of the 12th Imam. They are going to have some issues, following him if he brings something different than what we expect. And of course, we know that even some of the ulama, they're going to have some differences with the 12th Imam, and as the narrations say, I'm sure some of you know, the Imam is going to have a special way to deal with those ulama, inshallah. So if the 12th Imam was born in only this era, there would be, again, we're talking from the perspective of somebody who's not a Shia, there would be a likelihood that he might fall into the traps of modernism or postmodernism or all these other ideas which are not in line with Islam. Right? Imagine if the 12th Imam, for example, was brought up in a traditional, Shia household, right? Whether it was Iraqi or Iranian or Afghani or Pakistani or Khoja, whatever it is. Imagine that was what happened. He learned Azadari a certain way. He learned about namaz a certain way, whatever it is. And then he needs to bring a revolution. And then he learns later on in his life that he has to, change certain ideas. He, just like many of us, might say, I've been brought up a certain way in this time. It's going to be very, very hard for me to go against that, right? Now, again, you and I as Shias know that that's not going to happen, but we're talking to other people who don't have the same belief, right? That's what we're coming from. So the two ideas, the two branches are what? One is that he has to win over people, so he has to know throughout history how have people brought along revolutions? How have they changed people's ideas and cultures? That wasn't an easy thing to do. French Revolution, English Revolution, American Revolution, the Iranian Revolution, all these revolutions and ideas have changed throughout history. The Imam, living through all of these, now has a better idea of the psychology of individuals and humans. How can he come now, knowing what we are enslaved to, what systems we're enslaved to, how can he come and in the best manner speak to us so we know how to break out of that? Likewise, if he was born here, he might also be a slave to the system as well. Now, if we were doing a movie tafsir night, then this is where I definitely bring in the concept of Morpheus and Neo and being a slave to the system, being stuck in the Matrix and all that stuff, but this is not a movie tafsir night, so I can't bring that up. I'll have to save it for our first movie tafsir session, inshallah. So, what we see is having a long historical experience and background is actually a positive trait. It's not a negative trait. It makes sense for him to live through all of these things. Because after seeing through all this, then he would be able to know what's the best way to counter all these problems that are there. Now, there's a few other points to mention, I think, because I don't want to go over time, so we'll stop over here for now. So I'll leave the next point for next week, inshallah ta'ala. Let's just move on to the quiz. If you can recite, as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So yeah, as people are logging in, I'll just quickly summarize. So we're looking now, we're trying to answer, what is the reason, what's the justification for having an imam live so long? Even if it's impractical, you should give us a good reason so that we think that it might be more practical than it is. We mentioned that it's about having an awareness, a consciousness, and having lived experience through different things. At the first sphere is knowing about different governments, political ideologies, and systems. And at the second level, it's about knowing the people who've been enslaved and caught up in these systems. So the imam shouldn't be a slave to the system himself. So it's better if he's lived throughout all of these things, so he can sit from the outside. And it's also better that after living through all this, he knows the psychology and the history of how people have learned to change their mind, change their governments, and actually cause local revolutions. Because if he wants to bring this on a global scale, he needs to understand humanity at a global scale as well. And we'll mention the third point, inshallah, next week. Okay, I think do we have enough people, or do we want to wait another second? I think we're going to run out of time, so let's just get started, inshallah. So, salam alaikum to everybody that's here. To Mirza Rizvi, to RJ, Zainab, Juma Mubarak, I guess Juma Mubarak, Zahra, Mahdi Jafar, the Jessas, Nada Hedri, Ya'adi, Specialist, Yusuf Adi. Let's go ahead and start, I think 21 is good enough. Let's go. Good luck to everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First question. What is a valid reason for doubting the long lifespan of Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraju Sharif? I reminded you at the beginning of this session today, and we talked about it a few weeks ago, right? There are or is legitimate reasons for why people might deny it. Right, so we had the discussion. We talked about some reasons make sense, some reasons don't make sense, or maybe they all make sense. Okay, I think we have 3 more people, right? Yeah, we have 18, 19, 20. And this question also came on a previous quiz as well. No. So the answer is not all of the above, right? It's highly unlikely. We said it's impractical. But we said, yeah, there's no scientific proof, but that's not a reason, right? It's not unscientific. And we said it's also not illogical. So definitely it's not all of the above. It's only highly unlikely, but it's not an impossibility. Okay. Next question. Oh, let's check the leaderboard. Not a hedri. Ya Ali. So that's what happens when you have the ishq of Ali in your heart. That's what happens. Okay, but everybody's tied, but he was the quickest. What does the word Mahdi mean? Does it mean guide, guided, guidance, or all of the above? So I asked this question in a true and false, I think the first Kahoot we did on a Thursday night. That didn't really work out. So if you remember that, then you may remember the answer, but it should be here. So obviously, the root letters are ha, dal, and ya, or waw, coming from the root concept of huda or hidayah, right? And 48% of you put guide, which is incorrect. It's guided, right? Mahdi is the one who is guided, the rightly guided one. It's not a guide. Yeah. Awesome. Some arguments back there too, huh? Okay. So not a hedri, still at top. Okay. Awesome. Very good. Okay, let's keep going. This surah has been referred to as Ummul Quran, the mother of the Quran. Is it Surah Yasin, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Al-Fatiha, all of the above, or none of the above? All right, we have various alternative names for the surahs of the Quran. So, I want to see if any of you remember this. So those of you who have attended the tafsir sessions on Sunday, you hopefully should remember this. Ahsan. 61% of you got Al-Fatiha. So Al-Fatiha has a lot of names. One of them is Ummul Quran, and they say that everything is contained in Al-Fatiha of the Quran is in Al-Fatiha. In fact, everything is contained within Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In fact, everything is contained within Bismillah. In fact, everything is contained within the Ba. And then, of course, we have the narration that Imam Ali alayhi salam is the nuqta under the ba. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And of course, if not, Hedri was here, that would have been the perfect time, but it's okay. So he's still at top, but he's barely holding on to it. How many soccer players, I don't know why there's a picture there, how many soccer players should be on the field at the same time? I can't see the responses, but whatever, it's a bunch of different numbers. I picked this because some people have been asking, can you do like non-Islamic questions? I said, okay, fine. So I picked one of the random questions. I think enough of you should know this. Yeah, of course you're all able to answer this the quickest. That makes sense. Okay, 81% of you got it right. Yeah, we don't know what Mahdi means, we don't know which masjid is which, we don't know all these things, but we know how many players belong on a soccer field. With that, we'll end with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث عدم صفة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى صلى الله عليه وآله. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاري والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وعطيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأعطيت الله ورسوله وحتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بي. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة الملدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياء ورسلا أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم عمري لأمركم مطبع. صلاة الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بي. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله ووداعا. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الذكي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي. تبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول الكون سلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأخوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم له المعاصي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتحكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع نحيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه خير من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقك الله بدرجتك أعبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى جدك وأبيك وعلى أمك وأخيك وعلى تصة المعصومين من ذريتك وبنيك. السلام عليك علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد النقي والحسن بن علي العسكري والحجة القائم. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان علمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وكعبة الإيمان وإمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله لك ما وعدك من الناس وزهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وهافذا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.